Anchoring is when you associate two things together and one triggers the other. So it can be, by example, something happening on the outside that triggers an internal state. You see somebody who's wronged you in the past and you instantly feel horrible even if the person hasn't done anything bad yet. You see someone you've got an immense crush on and she hasn't or he hasn't done anything at all yet, but you're flushed with good hormones. You know, you're happy, you're giddy. Okay, it's that association thing. Now, what's important to know about this is the chain isn't always what it seems to be. You see, there doesn't have to be an external trigger, so to speak, an external anchor. There's what happens on the outside, and then we link it up with something in the inside. And it doesn't have to be current. It can be something that happened way in the past, or even, well, fairly recently, or even imagined future inside our heads. So it can be an imagining to which we have an anchor with a certain state with. And then when we connect two and two together, doesn't matter how it is or how it goes, as long as we connect. And very often it's an external event with an internal feeling, okay? That's the anchoring effect. Oh, so what's the issue with that? Well, we'll consider this. How we behave tends to be modified heavily by where we're coming from in as far as our states of mind, or you might call it moods, okay, are. So if you're, come on, really, in a happy state, you make better decisions. If you're in a fearful state, you might end up making life-saving or dangerous decisions. If you're just anxious, very often we have terrible decisions, terrible actions. So how we're anchored onto something really changes how we respond. Okay, so a process of learning for a lot of us is how to discharge these anchors, how to disassociate from them. And with regard that, neurolinguistic programming teaches us a few ways to do that. And we'll talk about basics real quick. Okay, there's what we call stacking, in which case you can take one anchor and then put another anchor on top of it, and put another anchor on top of it, and another anchor on top of it. Let me be clear. You can have an external trigger, and then you could add a good state on it, and another good state, and another good state. And afterwards, all you have to do is trigger the external anchor, and you get flooded with whatever state is conditioned in, or locked in, or anchored to that trigger. Okay? An example of this, and let me give you like the variety of anchors, just so you have an idea that this actually happens. Okay, so anchoring can be natural or unintended. It can be artificial or engendered. So let's say that things can happen naturally. Anchors can happen naturally. That triggering phenomenon can happen naturally. They can happen accidentally, and they can happen deliberately. When a trained practitioner uses these anchoring techniques, hopefully for good, but sometimes for not so good. And you'll know this from when you've ended up buying stuff you really don't like, want, need, or benefit from. And there's also the accidental firing of anchors. So it happens, by example, if you know how girls, they're all supportive and they hug each other or they tap each other when one or another is grieving. Sometimes, because, you know, when you were in a bad state, somebody tapped you on the shoulder. Sometimes it happens that because that happened at a very intense point in time, that the event was really intense, and if it happened repeatedly, even more so, you were grieving or feeling really bad, and then someone tapped you on the shoulder in a certain way. Sometimes it can happen where, by accident, somebody taps you on the shoulder in the exact same way, and then you start to feel really sad, bad, or grieving, or horrible, and you don't know why. Well, the why is because that anchor has been loaded or stacked, and then it was triggered, or it fires off. And so, external anchor, and then internal firing. And so, what you felt when the original anchoring was locked in, you suddenly feel again. So that's the phenomenon of stacking and the triggering. Okay, there's also a way of using anchors deliberately where we can not just stack them together one on top of the other, where we can stack so much of them, so much so that the state is really, really powerful. And then we can use that strong stack, good anchor loaded with positive feeling. And we can use that to discharge, destroy, or collapse is the usual technical term in NLP jargon, to collapse bad anchor. So you can create a trigger, okay? And when you feel bad, you can fire the trigger so long as the trigger, like magic, so to speak, was loaded with all the positive charge. And if you might think of an extended way of thinking about amulets or charms, think of them as just intensely anchored material or triggers or trigger tools or events. Okay, so if you have a lucky charm and you associate so much positive meaning with it, and you have all the stories and all the placebo effect, you know, when you touch it, you get that positive feeling. So in this way, you can actually use that engineered or incidental or accidental or even deliberate anchor created by you or someone else to collapse a bad feeling. Okay, so we've talked about anchoring, the firing of anchors. We've talked about stacking anchors and stacking anchors so that we can use that intense positive state to collapse a bad anchor. We also have another thing, which is the chaining, where you can lead a person up, by example, from feeling bad slowly with a bit of positive anchor, and then more positive anchor, and then more positive anchor. You could lead a person up through the stages from like feeling really shitty to gradually coming up and actually feeling much better. So I hope this gives you an idea of how anchoring has happened to you, has been used on you accidentally, and how it may have had been used on you deliberately, even by yourself, and how you can use this in your favor. And it can be as simple as wearing a suit or dress that you feel absolutely lovely in, and wearing it in front of the mirror and charging it several times. Oh, I look really good with this. And you don't know why, but every time you wear that, you feel really good. And if you had a really good event wearing that suit or that dress, lo and behold, each time you wear it, if you have that intense positive state, you have that anchor. And even if the interview is going badly, if you have that anchor on you, sometimes it's enough to carry your mood enough so that your actions and decisions are so good that even a lousy interview turns out well. So I hope this has been a useful exploration of anchoring. If you'd like us to talk a bit more about this, let me know, because we've a few workshops coming up, and I'd love to share as much as I can about this. Just ask. Ask me anything about neurolinguistic programming, and to the extent and degree that I can, I'll help you out through it. And we've a few workshops coming up. We hope you see you for that. And there's also an international online certification for neurolinguistic programming. That's coming up in the lineage of Richard Bandler himself. So if you'd like to join us for that, we would love to have you. So let us know, and I hope you learned something about anchoring that you can use today. Cheers.